Oh, it's still saying going live. Are we live now? Let me know in the chat. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay on my end whilst it sort of, I don't know, does whatever digital stuff it has to do. I've just had an email from youtube.com which says that this video is now live on my channel. So hopefully, Quantum Fire and Just a Snack saying hello. Sienna saying, and we're live. Oh, good. I'm so glad that things are working. There's quite a few bits to set up every week, and I'm always sat here just like something. There's going to be something that I forget to do. In fact, last week it was tweeting that I was like, I'll do that at some point. How is everyone though? Let me get up the chat. I did appreciate Quantum Fire suggesting that we should do the minutes of the last meeting, because it does sort of seem like the kind of thing that would happen on my channel. Very much a channel where there is minutes rather than jokes. Although, what did we do? We played some of George Orwell's Animal Farm, the video game. We may play some more of that this week. I have it ready. If you weren't here and therefore you didn't get to see lots of George Orwell's Animal Farm, the video game last week, then don't worry, you didn't miss a huge amount. We've kicked out Farmer Jones, and we're waiting to our sort of goals, I think, are to try and keep Snowball as sort of leader of the farm, and to I need to mute, I think, and to spread animalism to the other farms, and what's the other thing? Oh, keep Boxer the horse alive. I'm not sure how much agency the game actually gives us, so I don't necessarily know to what extent all of those things will be possible. But we're gonna try our hardest. I'm gonna very briefly this is not gonna be interesting # content to watch, but I am gonna briefly tweet that we are live. Just a Snack saying, which one? Remind me which one in Animal Farm is Stalin and which one is Trotsky. So Napoleon the pig. That could have very much changed your interpretation of what I was just talking about. Napoleon the pig is Stalin and Trotsky is Snowball. Although the vibes I was getting from the game so far are that the people who made the game have sort of just bunched all the pigs together, and so it's very much just like the pigs are bad, which I don't know. In my view, is just having not really got the book. Maybe part of me wants to do a sort of semi follow-up from the Jordan Peterson video where we just look at Animal Farm, the video game, and also last week I mentioned that there's a Hallmark adaptation of Animal Farm which gives it a happy ending, in which new farmers arrive, and I don't think there's a huge video in that. There's not like 20 minutes even probably in that idea, but it might be, I don't know, a fun little in between video. Sorry, this is not fun content. But yeah, so that is sort of sums up the minutes of the last meeting, I think. I'm sure there were some other things. Oh, sheep in space. Sorry, Sienna. Yes, we also want to try and get some sheep in space. I mean, this is what it looks like. It's quite a pretty game. Even if the gameplay isn't super duper exciting. But that sort of mostly covers the minutes from the previous meeting. Other than we sort of talked about lots of different bits at the end. It was quite fun at the end actually. We stopped playing the game for a bit and just chatted. In fact, when I was like, I was quite keen. Initially I was like, well, we're not going to just play games every week, because of all the people you'd want to watch play video games, I feel like it's probably not me. If I was to choose to watch someone play video games, it wouldn't be me, who's not very good at any of them. But then I was taking a little look at. I don't know if any of you have seen Tonight We Riot. Sort of vaguely interests me. So I think if there is some stuff that is vaguely relevant, we might take a look at it in some future weeks. Because this is a game which was published. I don't think it was made, but I think it was published by sort of the video games wing related to Means TV, which some of you might be aware of. And it's a sort of brawler, but it's like you play as lots of people. So it's kind of interesting. Or Just a Snack saying there aren't enough people in the Humanities streaming games, to be fair. Yeah, I mean, if it is something we do, we will be sure to, robustly critique them as we play, from whatever sort of angle seems relevant. What else have we got in the chat? Sorry, I was not paying attention at all. Just monologuing at you. Quantum Fire saying collapse of Animal Farm and Putin takes over. So yeah, the Hallmark adaptation of Animal Farm does sort of seem to imply, sort of seem to reflect quite well the arrival of a kind of oligarchy in Russia post the Soviet Union. Quantum Fire saying lol, Friends reunion, not seen it, but sure they didn't address white cast and homophobia. I mean, I'm gonna watch it. I don't think I can infuse my partner to watch it, because I don't think she watched like any Friends, like which seems like madness to me, because like just the pure cultural ubiquity of Friends when I was growing up, like so there's a channel in the UK, for those of you that aren't in the UK, called Hey, We're in House Here. We'll have to get you on as a guest one week, because and the Surfs are here. There should be an interview rule for given enough time. Everyone becomes a streamer. Well, I'm not going to lie. The two people that have had me on as guests on streams, and which I've enjoyed doing it and been like, yeah, actually, I might do that on my own channel, are you two. So you only have yourselves to blame. But in future weeks, I'll drop you a line. My partner does. She has lots of friends, far more friends than me, but hadn't, and probably for that reason did not spend much of her youth watching just Friends again and again. Like the pure just ubiquity of that program when I was growing up was just like. There's a channel called E4, which would just sort of play it on loop throughout like, I don't know, however many months it took to go from episode 1 to, the end. And it would just do, like 2 episodes a day, I want to say. Like it was quite difficult to not watch Friends if you sort of didn't, if you wanted to. Gobble gobble indeed. I'll have you on as guests separately, because then it like spaces it out and fills out the schedule a little bit. I wanted to make sure that I'd done a few just on my own before I brought, roped anyone else into this nonsense and like made you guys suffer. I also wasn't sure what time it was over your side of the Atlantic. Amones Ray saying that Means Interactive is the gaming division of Means Media. We are a video game publishing and development cooperative, creating post-capitalist leftist games. Our first title is Tonight We Riot. So yeah, in the future at some point, we might play. I've not played it at all, so I don't know what to suggest. But I'm quite interested in the way in which it's not just like the form of the game seems to take on that kind of collectivist angle as well. I think that's quite interesting. In fact, in my which video it was, I think both the sort of cancer culture video and the George Orwell, Jordan Peterson video, that involved some discussion of the ways in which we talk about like individuality and sort of individuals and sort of collectives in our contemporary culture. And I think there's something interesting about trying to bring some of that into video game world where you quite often are just one person. The Surf saying that if me and We're in Heather on the same stream, we always start drama. So smart, cool. Okay, I will keep you both very far apart from one another. But Tonight We Riot is badass, super hard though. Okay. What I was thinking we'd start off with a bit more Animal Farm, which is like quite the opposite of that. Is neither badass nor hard. It is possibly a game for children, but we've not quite worked that out yet because it's not. I don't know because it sort of jumps all over the place a little bit. I could become a drama streamer. Maybe that's what I need to be. Oh, hello, Watching the World. Thank you for joining us as ever. You missed very, very little. Me talking about, finally becoming a streamer. The lack of a Keemstar on the left void. See, I think that I'm presuming it's Lance behind the Surface account today. I feel like you could really fill that role. I don't know what I'm not good enough at keeping up on the online drama, so I need some informers to clue me in. That's what. Okay, so hey, John Duncan's here as well. I was about to try and play the game on the OBS thing. Yeah, I don't really know why that this is like pitched as a kid's book. Like I sort of do, but I don't think there is an age below which you definitely aren't gonna understand the stuff about totalitarianism, etc. Who was just saying? Oh, watch the world saying awesome. I do vote. You sort of peer review other leftists. I'd love to. So a sort of dream that I've got is of doing a thing of interviewing people or someone else doing it. A far better solution is someone else doing it, so I don't have to. Is some kind of show where you could people get interviewed, I don't know, maybe a little bit after they've made a video and having like a genuinely good faith discussion about the video that sort of one has just put out. I think that would be really cool. Because partly that I know that after I've put a video out, I've got about 1 million other things that I'd like to say on whatever the topic is. And so I would love having the sort of other people, I don't know, someone to prime those questions out. And I don't know, I might be alone in that. I wondered whether other people might think that was cool. But I don't know, if you've got any videos you think we should watch, do let me know in the chat and we can. I swear I scribbled some down for last week where I was like, oh, we should watch. There's really interesting, there's a really great video about, I can't remember what it's called now. There's a really great video about famous people with rich parents, which I really enjoyed, that I was going to share with you last week, but get JP on for the last video. I'm sure he would love that. I'm sure he takes criticism very, very well. I see Sam saying I like that idea a lot. Yeah, I think that would be cool. But my thing is that I always assume that no one will want to. I'm like, why would anyone come on my thing? I'm boring, but maybe I will. Maybe I will, like, test that idea out at some point. John's saying that my next video right now is about epistemology online, bringing in the lack of proper knowledge structures and that, yeah, like I think it's really interesting the way we sort of release things out into the world, and like I'm interested in how do I make it clear that although I put a lot of time into making the videos that I make as like good and as rigorous and as well researched and put together as possible, like how do you leave that tiny bit of space for going, yeah, but this is not like the 100% end of a conversation. And I often think, like, if I just put my video on and watch it back on a stream, whatever, just as me, or like on my Patreon, I do a thing where I do like a sort of director's commentary type thing, although I never call it that because I'm like, I don't know, I don't feel like a director of the stuff. I don't know, but anyway, I do that, and it's just me sort of talking over it, and I'm like, actually, you sort of want someone that's going to ask like good faith, but maybe sometimes difficult, like not difficult, but I don't know, prompts and questions that are going to draw you out and lightly challenge at least some of the things that you've put in a video, because I don't know, I think it makes for a more interesting ongoing conversation maybe. Pop in some awesome Karthik S is saying, pop in some awesome humanities podcast suggestions, please. What's good humanities podcast? I've currently started listening to what's it called? Human Resources, which is a podcast. Oh, okay, where's it gone? No, it's just giving me podcasts about human resources, which is not what I want. It's about slavery. So yeah, it's Moya Lothian McLean's podcast, which has just had like maybe 2 episodes come out, maybe 3. Oh, it looks like there might be a 3rd out. And it sort of examines legacies of slavery in the present day UK. And it's really interesting because, like, in ways, sometimes in, like, not necessarily, well, from the episodes I've listened to, not necessarily, like, legal or well, I suppose there's sort of, like, legacies, like, in the first episode, they look at, there is a school which exists, which was paid for by the wife of a slave trader, and Moya and the people that she interviews sort of look at the question of, like, how can we tell how much of that money came from slavery? Like, because it might not necessarily be that, you made $500,000 from slavery and then spent that on a school, but, like, in other ways. So it's sort of really interesting. John's saying, I've been meaning to listen to that. It's worth listening to. I found Apple Podcasts for some reason did something really funny where I couldn't get it to work initially for ages, but I found it really enjoyable. I think, like, the sort of rise of podcasts has like fascinated me for a while anyway, because there's something really interesting about the fact that they existed for such a long time before they in any way seemed to be like a popular thing that anyone sort of engaged with. Like, you could get them before having internet on devices, and like sync them to your iPod or whatever you had. But it's only been, I don't know, I suppose like Serial was probably the first like big podcast, and then everything took off after that, really, didn't it? But yeah, but it's got a really interesting form to it where it's, sort of some narrative, it's some interview, and yeah, from the single episode that I've listened to in the car on the weekend, I thought it was really, really good. Watching the World saying that I use Luminary which is a great service but lacking content sometimes. That's the one where they sort of like commission some podcasts, I think. Am I right in saying that? I guess a bit like Spotify have some Spotify exclusive, don't they? In fact, what's the one about Cuba? That's the one I've been wanting to listen to. Which is possibly a... Can't find it now. Blowback, that was it. And they had a first season as well. This is meant to be really good, and I've not listened to it yet. Because I quite often listen to podcasts whilst I'm falling asleep, and then occasionally I'm like, no, this is one that I actually want to listen to, so I can't do that. Watching the World saying that, yeah, Luminary's a bit like Netflix for podcasts. And Muggerfugger saying, been listening to podcasts since at least 2006. I mean, yeah, I don't know, there must have been some people listening to them for that time. We're in hell saying that, that Blowback rules. Okay, I will have to check that out then. And also that for a while into like 2012, basically all podcasts were about stand-up comedy. For me, I've just really like the explosion of, and I know you've got a video about this, the sort of explosion of true crime since Serial went out is really has just like fascinated me, and I find it interesting the way that Serial was relatively highbrow, but then pretty much all of the true crime that's followed it has been like just like a lot of it just like pretty openly quite trashy, and has also just like transferred onto Netflix because we got Making a Murderer, and then everything became like I don't know. Just the way in which actually the first thing was really highbrow, and then everything that followed it was like has been much less so, at least, and often a little bit on the exploitative side. And in fact, I've not watched. I know Sarah Z or Sarah Z, depending on what part of the world you're in, did a video about American. What's the one where he draws dicks and everything on Netflix? I'm not gonna be able to remember that. American Vandal, was it? I know she did a video about that, which I don't know. There was a very quick trajectory from the earnest first thing that got released into the world to like the parody, which just rocketed past. John saying that I find it interesting that podcasting tends to be seen as more legitimate than YouTubing. That's really interesting, actually. That I wonder if that's related to like radio sort of being a bit more highbrow than YouTube. Because I'd say definitely in the UK at least, partly because the fact that no one really listens to the radio, it becomes this sort of highbrow exclusive thing. Compared to like TV, which is flashy and everyone's got one, and I suppose, and probably the fact that it's more to do with words, isn't it? Radio, although you might have sound effects, we are definitely in the UK. I would say at least like culturally we're quite like spectacle is always a bad thing. We if we talk about something being a spectacle, we generally mean that it's of lower value or quality. It's all spectacle. Sort of all, no substance behind it. All what's the phrase? All fur coat and no knickers. Whereas, like, if you can't really do spectacle in the same way. There's a really interesting book. Is it called The Anti-Theatrical Bias? Maybe something like that. There's this notion that we have a kind of anti-theatrical bias where we're sort of where at least in the UK and possibly in the, I don't know, the Anglosphere, if such a thing exists, that we're sort of opposed to things that are too theatrical and are too visually exciting. Sienna's saying that we think it's trashy, pretty much, and I think that's right. That Quantum Fire saying, Tom, you listen to Radio 4 mainly. I listen to like no radio. I feel, I don't know, maybe I've just never got into the radio, so I will listen to, but yeah, which is interesting. Yeah, that podcasts have definitely for me at least brought me into listening to audio based content. Mugafug is saying, I wonder if there's a correlation between relative obscurity and perceived gravitas. Yeah, definitely. Like the fact that it is I don't know, the fact that podcasts are that tiny bit more obscure, even though they're really not these days. Like, I mean, everyone's got a podcast, let alone listening to them. But there's still that notion of it being a little bit not mainstream, at the very least, I guess. Sienna saying, I guess theatre is seen as not authentic. And John with screen similarly saying maybe there's a side of thinking that being on screen is conceited or even childish. I mean, I guess it's similar to, I suppose, although there's something about the distinction between how we think about TV and how we think about like cinema. And even with cinema, there's highbrow and lowbrow sort of stuff, isn't there? Makes sense. I sense Innuendo Bingo is more famous on YouTube than on Radio 4. That's on Radio 1, right? Innuendo Bingo? Maybe they put it on Radio 4. John's got 4 podcasts in a box under my bed. I've debated many times starting a podcast, and then you see lots of people joking about like, every white boy in the world's got a podcast, and I've been like, oh, okay, maybe not. Maybe I'm just getting too big for my boots. It also, I bet it's a lot of work. I guess like doing an interview one, maybe slightly less, but like some of the really high quality ones, like a Human Resources or a Serial or Shit Town or any of those really good like journalistic ones, probably take quite a long time. I was thinking like even like Behind the Bastards, which I often think of like as almost an interview one because it's just 2 or 3 people chatting. Actually, I always like there must be so much. There must be at least one person whose full-time job it is to write those scripts. I don't know. Does anyone listen to Behind the Bastards and know what? Got a good podcasting voice, good podcasting face. Some might say. I say a lot too much though. We're in house saying I think a lot of it comes from how YouTube is perceived. Most people think of YouTube as less artistic. Make sure to comment and hit that bell type stuff. Yeah, there is very much a sense on YouTube that one is self-promoting in some way. There is a sense of like vapidity. I've been at the moment toying with the idea of trying to write a book. Again, getting too big for my boots, about the sort of like dynamics of information on YouTube. And I think one of the really interesting things, slightly different, but sort of taking some cues from like a sort of manufacturing consent, although filters is probably slightly different because it's things that support and do the opposite. And one of the things I've been thinking about is really interesting, that we don't, that we still think of YouTube as a space where it is really vapid and empty and silly. Like it's still the space of Zoella and Jake Paul in like the cultural imaginary, and that actually, and when we think of like bad actors on YouTube or the bad things happening or misinformation, it's always about weirdos in their house talking at a camera, such as this. whereas actually there is a lot of very sophisticated. I mean, like PragerU is a fantastic example, right? It's actually quite a sophisticated outlet, and there's like loads of other examples. So what was the one that someone mentioned to me after I made the Johnny Harris video? Was it EFF? What's it called? Like the sort of, and they do like video essays. The economic, I think it's like the Economic Freedom Foundation. And it is, and it's sort of this.
The entertainment.
I think I'm right in saying it's this sort of right-wing think tank, but they sort of do video essays on YouTube, which are like, some of them are like obviously political, but some of them will be really sort of will present themselves as though they're a sort of video essay about a film or about a TV program, like any of your other favorite YouTubers might put out. But then actually, once you watch, you get some kind of political message behind it. And PragerU also being interesting. One thing that's I found really interesting was the other. Is that today? No, it's a few days' time. Oh, yikes, I'm sure that's a great video. Is PragerU have started putting out new videos in which the quality of production, that's not PragerU anymore, is much better, which is really interesting.
The most famous political scandal in American history is, of course, Watergate. It's so
they're playing. Sorry, everyone. You didn't need to snap, man. Yeah, so the other day I was on YouTube for some reason. I think I was on YouTube for like a work reason rather than just watching stuff. And there was a PragerU video premiering at the same time. I think it was about cancel culture in some way, and so it sort of piqued my interest because I was like, okay, what nonsense are they chatting about now? And I realised that they've actually got this whole set of new stuff, which actually is at least better aesthetically than much of their previous stuff. Because actually, a lot of their like main stuff, like this guy talking about Watergate, is sort of good in some respects. Like, it's obviously costs a lot of money to make because they have to fly people in, and they have a relatively decent studio, obviously. And, no one creative is doing this out of love. They're doing it for the money. But it's also got, like, strong boomer energy. Like, those graphics feel like at least 10 years out of date. And I've always wondered, like, maybe that's their audience. But something that's been really interesting is they've started to put out stuff now, which is actually... I've not seen the Candice Owens show, but where... they get these sort of... I think these are celebrities. I think these are US celebrities that I've not heard of. But they're like actually quite well-made videos with not only relatively good production value, but production value that feels a bit more modern. Like, this is actually
a free speech.
Relatively well put together. Hello, Sammy, classic Star Fox fan. Thank you for joining us. Sienna's saying it helps when you have oil money funding you, like Prager does. In fact, it's sort of interesting that I think they had oil money to begin with, but I might be wrong in saying this. I think they might get less of that now, and actually now it's fan funded. But one thing that I think is really interesting is what are all those different ways in which YouTube channels, either thrive or die, and a lot of it is that initial thing of, do you already have a platform or money behind you to make something work? John saying very School of Life graphics for the early video, that their older stuff, and I think that's you know, very much the case. It's just a little bit old, whereas this is kind of well done. Like
I'm a comedian and documentarian author.
This feels like a documentary you might watch on TV, and that's
boxing instructor.
Interesting. And I wonder where that step comes from, because with some of the other videos, I've always wondered, like, is it because it is just for a sort of boomer audience, and so actually having that strong boomer energy sort of is okay because that's the audience they're going for, and actually potentially that it's more about the videos being on Facebook than it is about them being on YouTube, whereas these feel like they're potentially targeting a slightly different audience, and I wonder whether they're trying to expand their reach a little bit and shed some of that that sort of boomer image. I don't know who any of these people are though. Quantum Fire saying, Tom, is boomer for you true boomer or just older than you? I don't know that I'm... I don't know. I mean, I'm a relatively young millennial. It's very Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro. Yes, actually. It is very Daily Wire or Ben Shapiro or... what's the Rubin Report, actually. It is actually that kind of vibe, like in a way that is very corporate professional, but still sort of definitely a step above the very sort of staid nature of their sort of mainstream videos about killing comedy. Like no one under the age of 30 is watching this and thinking that it is well made, because I've not got it on the screen. Like, yeah, no one under the age of 30 is watching this and thinking this is well made, because it's just at the very least out of date, if not poorly made. Ryan of the Angles saying Angel, saying, I think part of the idea of keeping old style graphics is consistency, which is probably really important to their audience who actually watches all of their videos. Ben Shapiro got his push from fracking money. Hi, Keir Begnam. Thank you for joining us. Lots of familiar faces around this evening. Thank you everyone for being here. Is Ben Shapiro also from money, as they say? I mean, that obviously doesn't surprise me. There was a really good article somewhere about sort of Ben Shapiro's rise to fame, as it were. Actually, I'll leave a YouTube tab open. I'm sure we'll come back to that horrid website at some point. What's it called? Like Ben Shapiro Hollywood something article. It was sort of this article about how he got taken under his wing. Trolling in... No, I don't think it's the New Republic. Oh, Let Me Make You Famous. That looked it's Vanity Fair. How Hollywood Invented Ben Shapiro. It's been a while since I read this, but I found it quite interesting. As someone who is sort of vaguely aware that he, like, I don't know, is more than aware that he exists, but hasn't hugely engaged with his stuff. Although, Jose Pedro Mosquita saying, first time here, looks good. Hello, thank you for joining us. It's lovely to have you here. Although when everyone's taking the piss out of Ben Shapiro sometimes, I feel like his awkwardnesses are probably similar to my awkwardnesses in many ways. Like, I feel like me saying the lyrics to what he beautifully called wet ass P word, like, I think me trying to recite the lyrics to that would probably be just as awkward as watching him do it. But no, that was a good article which I would recommend checking out. Questions. I like questions. They're good. His mother was an executive of a TV company and his father worked as a composer. Interesting. I haven't watched his video on transgender ideology. I had something. We might watch a video about rich parents in a minute because I thought it was good. So not even one to dunk on, just one to watch with because it's interesting. Spidey's Waffle saying, which should I read first? Capitalist Realism or Society of the Spectacle? I want to get into this sort of work, but I don't know where to start. I would suggest Capitalist Realism just for it's just a more engaging book. It was written in the recent, when was it? 2009 that it came out. So it's a little bit more recent, and therefore, the language it's written in is slightly more engaging. It's also, the style of Society of the Spectacle as a piece of work from Guy Debord, who is at least one of the key figures in the Situationist movement, Situationist International. Their writing is often intentionally sort of playful, or I suppose sort of playful is probably the word at times, in ways which on first read can be confusing, and it often does help to have some sort of guide through it. I'd say that is it called Comments on Society of the Spectacle, I think, which was the sort of book's probably not the right word, document, treatise that Debord wrote a little bit later. I'm not sure exactly how long later, I can't remember now, is slightly more solidly written, and so is a little bit easier to follow. It's like it has case studies, whereas Society of the Spectacle is sort of a lot of aphorisms, a lot of very short sentences, and therefore it can be difficult to get a handle on. This one sort of, will explain an idea through talking about some actually real stuff that has happened in the world, and therefore I at least found much easier to follow. Capitalist Realism, I will say, has I think there's a PDF of it somewhere, relatively easy to find usually. Is an interesting one in that it has some case studies which sort of focus in on stuff which, if you've not read or seen or listened to, can be a little more difficult to get into maybe. Oh no, I'm thinking of Ghost of My Life anyway. What I quite like about Fisher's work is that it's often sort of almost essay collections which have been worked into a sort of book, and so it makes it sort of easy to dip in and out. But no, I would definitely suggest Capitalist Realism rather than Society of the Spectacle as a kind of first delve into something. Is it 92 pages? Is that really what it is? That was an ebook one. That was when I was trying out ebooks. So yeah. Also, I think Society of the Spectacle is also quite short, I believe, but that doesn't mean that it's super easy. John Duncan saying Capitalist Realism never struck me particularly. I know some people love it, but I just didn't connect to it. See, I think Mark Fisher's work is interesting because I only read it post 2015 at least, when it almost, only 4 years after its publication, felt like it was talking about a slightly different time. And I often hear it discussed fairly regularly online, as though it discusses the moment we're in now. And I don't know, I just don't necessarily feel that it does anymore. After Corbyn in the UK, after Bernie Sanders in the US, after sort of left-wing movements rising in lots and lots of countries in Europe and in South America, in Asia. I think a lot of the sort of left-wing parties hadn't necessarily gone away in quite the same way. But John saying, that he read it in 2019, it sort of felt like a book out of time a little bit, because I'm not sure that it does, talk to this moment in quite the same way. Like the key quote from Capitalist Realism is that one about which is pulled from Jameson maybe, or Zizek, I can't remember, but is the one about you can't. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And like, if you look at something like the Bernie is Back rally, right, as one of the biggest events that I can think of. Actually, maybe the trailer's the better one. Like, this is an awful lot of people imagining a world, imagining the end of capitalism, right? In whatever, I'm sure people have differing opinions on the extent to which the sort of Bernie movement represents that. But yeah, that key idea of the fact that we can't even think beyond capitalism just seems to not be where we are anymore. And that doesn't mean that, Fisher was wrong when he wrote it. I think at that period of time, that was very much the sort of cultural place we were in, even after the 2008 financial crisis. But I think it just maybe took a little bit of time for some of the sort of aftershocks of that crisis to really bed in. I mean, like, for example, I've been trying to book some train tickets to go to London, see some friends, and try and see some shows and stuff. Now that that's allowed, and for those of you that aren't in the UK, there is a thing called there has been a thing for a long time called a 18 to 25 rail card. I think it used to be called a young person's rail card, but they changed that for some reason. And then they released a new one called the 26 to 30 rail card relatively recently, partly as an acknowledgement that you're now poorer till you're a little bit older, right? That idea of by the time you're 25, as Thatcher said, if you were still catching the bus at 25, you failed in life, and that you've like naturally got to a better place in your life by that age, is just sort of silly these days. So they released a new one, and it's not called this anywhere on the actual website, but in the sort of header for it, it is called the Millennial Rail Card, which just feels like a really clear expression of the extent to which our particular generation, but also those following, have been screwed by the particular way in which the economic system economic sort of system has gone, and as a result of stuff like that, A, you get the 26 to 30 millennial rail card, but B, you also get people imagining a world beyond capitalism in a way that Fisher just wouldn't have been able to see because it wasn't happening then. And it's sad that it was only a few years later that became a thing. John said, sorry, I'm just going to give out some practical life advice, because John's saying furious that they don't have a student rail card. If you are a full-time student, you can apply for a young person's rail card. No matter what age you are, because I had one when I was 26 or 27 because I was doing my PhD and that counted. So you go and claim that rail card which is rightfully yours, John. Question: do I have an opinion on the anti-German left? Is that a thing? people on the left that are against Germany, like just as a Germany as a concept, Germany as a is that a thing? Sorry, I've not come across this, so I don't have any strong opinions on the anti-German left. Someone mentioning One-Dimensional Man. I've not read One-Dimensional Man, but I've heard a lot more about it in recent years, which has been quite interesting. Because I feel like Marcuse is sort of one of the one of the folks from the Frankfurt School that gets talked about. John saying applying now. You can get that rail card. It's a third off. And train tickets are so expensive that the 30 quid that it cost in a year, I've already made back from buying a single train ticket to London. But no, I feel like I've heard a lot more about Marcuse in recent years, which is interesting, yeah, because in terms of the... okay, no, it's just a name, the anti-German left. They're Zionist. I'm not aware. I guess they're a group, maybe. I'm afraid I'm not aware of them. One-Dimensional Man is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, like I've heard a lot of people championing it in recent years. It's pretty much about Freud's view on civilization. Is that Eros and civilization? I think I'm jumping in at two different points in a conversation here. But yeah, I've heard a lot more about Marcuse recently than I feel like I had in previous years. And yeah, that's interesting because of the Frankfurt School sort of scholars, he's not one of the major... Although, I will say, have I got it? Or did I have it on an ebook? No, I think I've got an ebook. So, whenever I'm writing, I get really, really in my head about how well I'm doing, and about that thing where you... having a blank page in front of you is always terrifying, and so you never want to put the first words down. And also, on the other end, whenever I'm going like, this is the final draft, I'm like, oh, well, I'll make a few more changes. A little while ago, I read the... Adorno and Horkheimer... my mind has gone blank. So a little while ago, I read Dialectic of Enlightenment by Adorno and Horkheimer, and the version that I read was a sort of version that was a couple of times after, where they'd written a preface to it. Preface, I'm never sure. And it's really interesting to read, because it's basically like, yeah, we made some mistakes, actually, and we're not going to change them here, but we sort of wish we could. And there's something really interesting to me about reading like canonical thinkers, like really like important thinkers that everyone holds up to be great, and that often maybe I think are great too, and just seeing them write things such as, we do not stand by everything we said in the book in its original form. I find that really, really reassuring in many ways, because I'm constantly like, I don't stand by anything I said ever either, so that's great. And I think Gender Trouble is similar. I think Judith Butler, in her introduction to Gender Trouble, says similar stuff. And I always find that massively reassuring. Like, if I was making suggestions to people who had a lot to read and needed to read really quickly, I would be like, skip the preface to stuff, because it's never going to have the useful stuff you actually want. In fact, it's probably going to raise lots of questions, which may be helpful for your brain to not have, because it will have them doubting stuff. But I actually find that just reading about people who are like influential and celebrated thinkers, reading about them having reread their old work and gone, I'm not sure about this, is just very warming for my soul, I think, and makes it much more easier to sit down and write. John's saying that read some Marcuse recently and really enjoyed it. Sienna's saying similarly. Yeah, I'll have to check it out at some point. Just a Snack saying that it was the first primary text I read after finishing my philosophy A-levels. Horrible decision at the time, but happy I did so now. Yeah, sometimes it does feel like that when you're reading stuff. I read, maybe a couple of years ago now, I was like, I'm going to read Ulysses. And I did, it's that thing of like there are moments where you're really enjoying something, but it carries like a big weight on your brain to be like, I've got to, I'm reading this thing that's mammoth. I think maybe a year or so ago, I did the first 3 chapters of Capital and was like, those are the important bits. And now I sort of warmed up to it by reading lots of the essays and lots of the stuff like that. And now I'm like, okay, I want to actually, engage slightly more with the rest. I've sort of dipped in and out of the rest when I'm like, previously I've been like, oh, I need some quotes about enclosure, and there's just some stuff in there somewhere about enclosure. Or I've been like, oh, I want to think a little bit about the working day. At some point I want to make a video about weekends or something like that and do like a fun what's the history of the weekend. Oh, it's a union thing, which I think for most of us is really like boring revelation because we're all aware of that. But although I don't know, maybe I can do a slightly fuller history so that is interesting for everyone. But yeah, and so I dipped into the chapters about the working day, but I really want to read through the whole thing, do like a start to end. And I'm sort of like, why didn't I just carry on after the first 3 chapters? Because the first 3 chapters are sort of the important ones, but they're also sort of the boring ones because they're sort of the ones that you instinctively know. Hey, John's here from the Lit Crit Guy. I've still not watched your new video, I'm afraid, John. It is on my list of things to do. I'm very excited about it. I've seen Historicize Everything. Someone screenshotted that, and so I do need to watch that. I can't think of who it is that said about Capital that like anyone that's like worked a job for, works like a normal job will sort of instinctively understand it. I can't think it was who it was that says that. Like a lot of it just makes sense, right? The idea that someone is making money off of the work that you're putting in. Hello, Darren Legary as well. It's always. I was just so surprised that people are here. Thanks for being here, everyone. Oh, lots of questions. But yeah, so the first 2 chapters are sort of the bits that you get. But he he goes through in a lot of detail about how the wool becomes the hay becomes the tries to become a chair or whatever it is. And so it's sort of interesting. That sounds like a David Harvey line. I'm not sure I don't think it is. Although I would recommend to anyone, if you're gonna read Capital, that David Harvey's sort of guide to it, if I can get it in the thing, is really worth getting a hold of. It's like basically for each. I sort of wish it was divided, and this is a very, very minor criticism. I sort of wish it was divided into like slightly more precisely into the chapters of the book, because it sort of sometimes is, and then it sometimes feels like it isn't in quite the same way. But what I've tended to do is read a chapter of Capital first, and then read a chapter of this. Because then I sort of get, I don't know, I often find then that it means that I get my own sort of understanding of it, and then I see how David Harvey's interpreted it, rather than I feel if I did it the other way around, I'd just read it how he's read it. But it's good. Like, this is really friendlily written and engagingly written, so you sort of do a chapter of Capital which sometimes isn't super engagingly, written. So once you get first, so I might not reread that. See, this has been the debate in my head: is do I reread the first 3 chapters because I know what happens, I'm aware of the plot of those, or do I not, because then I can just get on to what apparently is the good stuff. Watching the World saying that you can get the audiobook of Capital from Audible. I don't know if I could listen to the audiobook of Capital. I don't know whether like that would be slightly too much. Although footnote will not sound like a word. Is that where they do like footnote? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. John saying I was surprised by how easy to read much of it is, given how people. Yeah, I mean it's just long, isn't it? In fact, someone was saying about. Someone was asking how PhDs work. Oh, and hello to everyone that has said hello as well. I'll try and get through some of these questions. But Spidey's Waffles said, can you mention how PhDs work? I just finished an English degree, and I'm not sure if I want to teach in secondary schools or to go to an MA and then PhD. One thing I often find about PhDs is that people, like, we have this notion that it's like a hard thing to do, and like it is. But I think the ways people talk about it is though it's like hard every day, as though you're sort of like pickaxing through you're doing hard labor and it's always difficult. Whereas I found the more, like there is days like that. There are days where you're like, I don't understand this article that I'm reading. I just have no idea. Or I'm trying to synthesize all of this stuff into 1,000 words and I just really can't work out how to do it. Like there are days like that where your brain is just hurting, but I find a lot of it, actually the sort of difficulty of it is just the fact that it's like 3 or 4 years of your life trying to stick with a topic which is, by its very nature as a PhD, sort of higher level in some way and very specific, and that you probably care deeply about, and there's possibly like one other person in the country that's doing a PhD which is in any way similar, and I found I didn't really find anyone who's doing anything similar to me until like the 3rd year of my PhD, where I was like, oh my god, this is you're doing similar things, this is so cool. So I find like the ways in which it's difficult is maybe similar to reading Capital, to bring that back around, in that something being John saying you don't necessarily need to be a genius to do a PhD. You just have to be interested enough to grind through it. Some things we think of as difficult as though they're going to be difficult every moment. And sometimes it's just the perseverance, I think, more than anything. You just have to be willing to do all the reading. But I don't know where in the UK, if you're in the UK or not. Who was it that was asking? Spidey's Waffles. So I don't know how relevant my experience or John's or anyone else in the chat who might have done / be doing a PhD. But the system in the UK generally is that you do a master's and then go on to do a PhD. I think some people can skip them. I think in the US it's like, and some other countries it's slightly different, because a master's is sort of, if you sign up for a PhD program, you sort of do the master's bit as part of that. It's at least longer. It's things about 7 years. You have to do exams in other countries as well. Whereas in the UK, you just do, you sort of just do the thesis and then a Viva exam afterwards. Although most people have some sort of upgrade process. But that is just usually that you present like a chapter and have a quick Viva about the chapter afterwards. Watching the World saying, did you skip your master's with your PhD? Always seemed mad to me because my master's was so hard. Wondering on your take. No, I did a master's and wrote a master's dissertation, and that went okay, and that's what encouraged me. John saying, hopping off for dinner, good stream, Tom. Thank you, John. Thank you for joining us. I'll get you on as a guest at some point. Okay, I'm going to start doing guests because everyone today has rocked up into the chat and said hello. Brian Nelson saying, how's that video on the West going? Haha. I'm looking forward to that if you do it. but also something about work culture and days off would be interesting. I think it's probably not gonna be the next couple of months at the very least. I'm really interested in getting around to it, because I think it's an interesting topic and one that a big thing at the moment for me is in terms of thinking about some of those big topics that I want to cover, is also finding a way that I can really link them to something in the present day that just means, I don't know, that just makes people see some sort of relevance to their lives, I guess. My video that I'm currently working on, spoilers, I guess, is about like nationalism, in the sense of like the way I'm going to frame it is like, what is a country? So sort of more the belief in the existence of nations as a thing, rather than necessarily sort of far right nationalism, although one could argue that, you know, one sort of leads to the other relatively easily anyway. But one thing I'm finding with that is I'm not entirely sure, like, I know why it's relevant to people's lives, and I feel like after watching you might, but, you know, in the introduction you might be like, I actually don't really fancy a history lesson right now, thank you very much, Tom. Ryan of the Angels saying having guests on the stream would be really cool, to be honest. I will do that. I'll start to put together a bit of a schedule, and see who fancies joining us. But yeah, so John kindly, when I last did a series of streams, and I did have lots of guests on, John from the Lit Crit Guide did very kindly join me, which was nice of him. What's my opinion on ridiculously expensive liberal arts PhDs at Oxbridge without full funding? So I don't know how much it costs to do a PhD at Oxbridge. I don't know if it's similar to elsewhere. I think most universities, if you were to pay to do it, I think is, I don't know, maybe about £4,000 a year, maybe. I think that sounds about right, maybe. So here on prospect.ac.uk, it says that tuition varies, but usually falls between £3,000 and £6,000 per year for UK and European Union students. So I don't know how much it costs at Oxbridge. Maybe it's within that range. I'm not sure. I would suggest that if you want to do a PhD, you should probably try and get the funding to do it. Actually, the support that will come with that funding is also sort of part of what you need. That you might not be quite supported in the same way. Watching the World saying so a PhD is cheaper than undergraduate. So it is cheaper per year to do a PhD than it is to do undergrad. But you know, that's sort of reflected in the fact that you are, you know, it's mostly self-directed research for a PhD. So you've got possibly one supervision a month. You know, you might audit some modules if you fancy, there's a particular skill you need for your research project that you don't have. But you're not going to lectures in quite the same way. In fact, you might be sort of teaching on them. You know, one of the reasons universities like having PhD students is that it sort of boosts their rankings in various ways with the I think it's with the research excellence framework, I think, in the UK, that rather than the teaching one. But also it's cheap labour to have around. So PhDs, you end up, you generally tend to, or at least you're given the opportunity to teach. But I don't know, my position would be that I would suggest wait, if you didn't have funding 1 year to do it, would potentially be to wait till the next year and try and get the funding to do it. But that's also just that was my experience, and so I don't want to suggest that you definitely shouldn't do it and pay for it. Because that's not been my experience. So I can't tell you for sure. Borders are just a blind to bleed for. I would say that the right took the idea of nationalism in the last 6 years. That's why they have won over loads of the working class. I mean, yeah, like there is arguments of like how do you build a sort of progressive notion of nation. I mean, one of the most interesting. I'm not going to keep getting books off the bookshelf because I was thinking no books in the bookshelf, and I'm just going to tidy them away when we're done. But one of the most interesting books about nationhood and nationalism and nationality is Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities. It is just over there though. And you know, one of his sort of prompts for writing the book was the sort of stickiness of people's attachments to their nations, right? And in particular, you know, he's coming at this from a sort of Marxist background. The idea that actually embedded in sort of Marxist ideas is a notion of internationalism, right? And in sort of doing away with the state and therefore sort of doing away with the nation, and that, you know, it's workers of the world, right? It's not workers of Germany. And one of his prompts for writing the book was actually noticing that actually that sort of didn't go away. That a lot of the wars that were fought post the Soviet Union becoming a thing, for example, were still like national, you know, between countries. And then, yeah, so Oxford ODI PhD potentially costs 25 grand a year, really. Watching the world saying, I'd be going for a PhD in chemistry, so I'd imagine the two are vastly different, but I keep mulling it over, and it's helpful to hear someone that's been through it. Yeah, so I think doing a science PhD is quite different. I mean, I know one person that's done a science PhD, and generally I think how it works is that if you're going for a science PhD, you sort of someone that works at university already a researcher will be doing a project, and they will need like 3 people to help them on that project who will do like a bit of that project, and therefore they will like advertise 3 positions where you will sort of do that research, and that will be your PhD research. And that does happen in the humanities sometimes. Like that does happen where someone's doing, you know, maybe a history project, and they you know, need someone to help them with a part of it, and therefore there is a bit of the research which becomes their PhD. But it happens slightly less, I would say. Quite often it's that you put together a proposal, and you find someone who works at, like a lecturer or professor who works at a university who it would make sense to be your PhD supervisor. And so you sort of pitch it to them, and therefore you, and sort of by virtue of doing that, you sort of get to do your so it's a slightly more independent project in that sense, and that they support you doing it. So yeah, it is quite different, I think, at least. Although, as I say, I can only really talk to my experience of it. Ryan saying, I can't tell if 25k is supposed to be madly expensive or really cheap because I'm in the US. Sienna saying, average wage in the UK is 32,000. So I read this recently, that the average wage in the UK is 32 grand, and I'm still like baffled by this. Because I don't know. I just feel like I don't know many people. Like I don't know. And I don't know whether it's like a median, a mean thing. Because I feel like I just don't know that many people that earn that much money. So median, the average person earns £585 a week, which works out around. But is this like a mean and median thing where that's like a slightly distorted figure? Because if you have lots of really rich people, it pulls it up. Like, I've always assumed it's like about 22 grand or something. Like, I don't know. Maybe I've just always worked in like the arts and stuff, and so yeah. Here, so that's median, I think. Is currently 31,461 according to this website. I don't know what the mean is. Would the mean be? Would that make more sense? Is there any mean wage in the UK? I don't know. I don't know. Where would one find it? If there's anyone that includes part-time workers, but I would have thought part-time workers would have brought it down. No, because they've got less. Because because one of the things that the Tories always try and do is say that there's more people that are in work than there is. They say, like, we've got, I don't know, whatever percent. They say we've got 75% employment rate, but, a whole bunch of those people are on 0 hours contracts and potentially working like a day a week. Okay. Alexander McDonough is saying, look on the ONS. Okay. Good shout. I can't spell. Okay. Earnings and working hours. Oh God, this is far too data heavy for me. Spotlight whole economy year on 3. This is far above my little brain. Part-time's hourly is sometimes higher, so once you scale it, it looks like a lot. Maybe okay, so maybe I suppose it also depends on how it's not necessarily like the amount per year. I thought they'd try and fudge it. I don't know. No, I suppose you'd fudge it to go up, wouldn't you? But that seems like a huge amount. I don't know. It's just a huge amount of money. Far more than I would have predicted it being. Yeah, I can't really find gross weekly earnings by occupation. Wonder if this will help. And they're all just Excel spreadsheets anyway, so I don't want to. I don't want to load up a whole spreadsheet to. Oh, Sienna's saying like she's had a revelation. So yeah, I guess it depends how they get to the figure, as well as how whether it's like a average, what kind of average it is. But I wonder whether having a lot of people who are earning, having a few people who are earning ridiculous sums potentially brings it up. Is the Tories, you expect them not to fudge it? Well, they're going to fudge it in some way, aren't they? But it's trying to work out. No, I think I was suggesting that maybe they might fudge it down so that everyone felt like they were earning the average wage, rather than fudge it up. Like, there's sort of pros and cons to both, isn't there? Like, some people look at that and they go, we must be doing well as a country because we have a high level wage. And some people look at it and go, I'm angry now because it turns out I'm in the lower bracket of earners. So there is something really interesting about the way in which people perceive the amount that they earn as well. So in 2019, in the general election, one of the sort of key Labour policies was that because people are often like, if you get a Labour government, tax is going to go up. They're very clear that like tax will not go up for anyone earning below 80 grand, right? Because that's a huge amount of money, and that's like the top 5% of earners. But there was a guy in Question Time. So we have a show in the UK called Question Time where generally like people, like a panel of politicians will come on and you can ask them questions. You can ask, and there's like a live audience. You can ask the panel of politician questions. And during one of these, a guy came on who said like, he was like, 80 grand isn't just people who earn in the top 5%, because I earn 80 grand and I am not in the top 5%. I'll find just a short clip.
I'd like to call out Labour as liars. I am one of them people that he will tax more, and I am nowhere near in the top 5%. So I'm calling you a liar right now. That 5% is a lie, right? I am nowhere near that. And you are going to income tax me as an employee. You're not going after the billionaires, you're going after the employees, where it's easy money because it's PAYE. I have no choice.
That's just not... I'm afraid on that you're mistaken. We're not going to raise income tax for anybody apart from the top 5% of earners.
I am not in the top 5% of earners.
So we're not going to increase your income tax.
But you are, because I've read your policy.
Because this guy's just certain. I think he says the 80 grand figure in a moment, but he's absolutely certain he's not in the top 5%.
It's above £80,000. And I am nowhere near in the top 5%, let me tell you. I'm not even in the top 50%.
And that's why we're not going to increase your income tax. And
So hang on, let's just be clear.
That's not what I want. So this guy like is certain that he's not even in the top 50%, earning £80,000 a year, which is like, for international viewers, that's a huge amount of money. I can't work out. I don't know how to explain that is a huge amount of money. But yeah, I wonder whether it says something about the ways in which we sort of level our expectations to be. We sort of just assume everyone else is getting on sort of the same as us. That even though he is earning a huge amount of money there, he's just assumed that everyone else, like, it doesn't feel like he's in the top 5%, because of course it doesn't, because he is normal and therefore everyone else is also earning similar amounts. And I wonder whether we all do that we all go, well, I'm normal, of course I am, and therefore, what I earn is similar, and that probably has like, good outcomes and bad outcomes, I guess. But fascinating that he can be like very that's very wealthy in the UK, and just doesn't even believe that he's in the top 50%. It's amazing. Like it's Mugafugger saying like that you can't even 11,364. No, I think it's more. I think it's more in. Is it not more in dollars? Am I completely got that wrong? So as of today, 100 and... Oh, I think you just slightly missed the comma. It is 113,648 United States dollars. I mean, I like that number means nothing to me. I have been to the US twice, but it always just seems like odd money. Also, because you do the thing where like when you buy stuff in shops, it doesn't have the tax on it or something. So you like the food is a certain amount, and food is really expensive in the US anyway. And then it like is more when you get to the till or something, which has always massively confused me. Just a Snack is saying that in First a Tragedy, Then a Farce, Zizek opened with a statement about how the super rich are sort of creating a sublime world of their own in which they can live their lives normally. I remember that being a really good book. It's been a long time since I've read it, but So First as Tragedy, Then as Farce was Zizek's book, which came out after the financial crisis, I think. Or was it a little bit later? And it's 2009. So yeah, he does like to write a speedy book about anything that happens. I mean, when did his pandemic book come out? I think it came out like just in a completely. Oh, so he's now written a second one. Okay, the first one just came out so quickly that I was like, I can't believe that you have anything useful to say. So I'm sorry, Professor Zizek, or I'm not sure what his title is, but I do like your stuff, but I just can't believe that you have anything particularly interesting to tell us about the pandemic, like a month into it. But First as Tragedy, Then as Farce, I remember having a good time reading, and it's relatively short, I think. He often writes relatively short books. Everyone, people agreeing with me, which is nice, saying that it was. I think there's a tiny bit of a delay between me talking, it beaming itself to you, and then you typing in the chat, and then it coming back to me. I think he is definitely on a little bit of the cocaine. But I mean, gets the books out, so I don't know what kind of things you're allowed to say on live streams on YouTube. It gets like pulled off. I mean, not that I particularly think that anyone's that the important people of YouTube are like watching my thing, but I definitely think there must be some sort of system. Oh, so America has a higher amount of big earners, but a lower middle class than the UK, segregated from upper class and below workers. So there is a sense of like being stuck in a bubble where your income is the norm. There's something interesting about the way in which Americans use the word middle class as well, or the phrase middle class, sorry. Because the sense I get of it, at least, is that middle class in America sort of means everyone, right? That means like, and it probably is used in the same way that we use the word working class, I would say. Like, I watched someone give a paper at a conference a little while ago about I watched someone give a paper at a conference a while ago about Elizabeth Warren's dress speech. I don't know if any of you have seen this, and it's about her mother having a dress and having to get it and saving it or something. And it's very much this story about, having a what I would call a working class upbringing, but that I get the sense that in America is called a middle class upbringing, because in America it feels like the phrase working class means everyone who is like what I'd probably call like the precariat, right? People who are just have absolutely nothing almost, whereas we'd use it to mean like people who are actually quite well off, like to be middle class. Like there's a whole sort of sitcom, I guess, in the UK called Keeping Up. Oh no, what's it called? With Hyacinth Bouquet. And her name is like spelt Hyacinth Bucket. Keeping Up Appearances, that's it. Her name is like spelt Hyacinth Bucket, but she tells everyone she's called Hyacinth Bouquet. And it's all about like her trying to sort of act at a slightly higher social class than she actually is in reality. And like for like we generally use the word middle class in the UK to be like actually quite well off, and probably to describe people who are super duper well off, who would describe themselves as being a bit middle class because actually they went on their second holiday this year. And I think that maybe says something quite interesting about the ways in which we like to think of ourselves. Like I think in the UK we're sort of happy in some way, not happy to have a working class, but there's still that remnants of a culture which recognises that those are the people that graft in society, and as we discussed last week, our discourses around class aren't great, but yeah, but I don't know. There's something interesting about the ways in which maybe we recognize it. So watching the world thing, I would say Bouquet is middle class. Well, I think the idea is that like she thinks she is, but actually she's not. She's sort of actually like just okay, but is trying to act as though she is really well off. I don't know. Yeah, there's a interesting. I don't know. There's something interesting in that, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. See, the fun things that we get in these live streams are the sort of half ideas that I've had, things that I've sort of thought while walking back from the shops, which is sometimes, I don't know, sometimes maybe more interesting than the super developed ideas that go into my videos. Muggerfug is saying, I live in the US, it sounds like your middle classes are upper middle class. Potentially, yeah. But there is like a real, I mean, I get the sense that we're much more anxious about class in the UK than you are over that side of the pond. There's a great bit when I was doing my research for the Orwell video. There's a fantastic thing about where he describes himself as being lower upper middle class, I think. And just that way of like he has to pitch himself really specifically. And also he's trying to like make himself sound less well off than he actually is. Like he does that thing, right? Orwell does the same thing that we've just been talking about, where throughout his work, and particularly in bits where he's writing like a preface to a book or whatever, he'll pitch himself as being like a really ordinary guy, but like he went to Eton. And yes, he sort of got a scholarship to go to Eton, but like getting a scholarship to Eton at that point in time wasn't like these days. I think it's more that they, find people at state schools and then sort of give them the chance to go to Eton. Whereas at that point, it was that you were just below the point where you could afford to go to Eton instead. Ryan saying there's probably something in this discourse about US people doing anything they can to seem more successful than they are, but I can't articulate that well enough. I mean, there's that phrase about temporarily disenfranchised millionaires, isn't there? Not temporarily disable. Instagram disenchanted millionaires. Who said that? Oh yeah, John Steinbeck, of course. Said, always a guy with good quotes. Said that socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Sorry, embarrassed was the phrase. But yeah, which is really interesting. And Sienna's saying in the chat, and I think this is it's sort of the opposite here. People want to cling on to the idea of the working class, even if they are, of being working class, even if they aren't. Which again was something we talked about last time round. The UK is pretty. Andy's saying, welcome, Andy. Is saying, and the UK has a pretty entrenched sense of class because of NRS social grades. So I think that is the yeah. So this is another interesting thing that we can maybe chat briefly about. What's bleak? Oh, the quote. So we talk quite regularly, or have been at least, on these streams about the bad ways in which we talk about class at the moment in particular. And one of these actually is what someone just brought up in the chat as sort of these NRS sort of social grades or sort of view of social class. And these are, if I can find a picture. So what this does is divides class up by the kind of work that someone does. Okay, so E is state pensioners, widows or widowers, or whatever the non-binary equivalent of a widower or widow is. We have our sort of like working class in this formulation means someone that does semi or unskilled labor. You get a skilled working class who do sort of skilled manual work. Sorry, that's the crucial bit, that it's manual work. And then by the time you get into your C1s and your Bs and your As, which are your sort of lower, middle, and upper middle classes, it's all about the fact that you do white collar work, right? So this is very similar to that division, which is mostly comes from the US, I think, of like blue collar and white collar jobs, right? You've got your manual jobs, which are your sort of working class jobs, and your white collar office jobs, which are your middle class jobs. And this is quite different to the kind of class that you're talking about if you're taking like a Marxist lens, for example, where you're talking about one's sort of relationship to the means of production, where it's, are you where to be bourgeois, or in the petty bourgeoisie is to be, middle class or upper class, is that you are exploiting others for their labor, that you are earning money through earning money off your off the ways that you invest your capital, or whether you're earning money from hour by hour or week by week or month by month for the time that you put in, and so this system here of these A, B, C1, C2s, Ds, and Es is, at a time potentially reflected some of those things about how much money you have and where you sit in society. But the problem is that it still gets used today, and it still gets used like in the UK today, in what is very much a post-industrial economy now, where actually this system doesn't work so well anymore, because actually state pensioners in the UK who in this formulation come up as E, sorry, you can't see my mouse, but come up as E, as your sort of lowest level of subsistence, actually these days are probably doing quite well because they bought houses at the right time, and they probably have a sort of work pension as well. But even if you just had your state pension, then actually the fact that you bought your house at the right time means you're doing all right. My mum recently started getting her state pension, and the fact that she already owns the house because they, bought a house at a good time, they bought a house for like 20 grand or whatever, and it just kept going up in value, means that actually the like, I don't know, 500 quid a month or something, is it a pension? I'm not sure. Like, actually that's quite a lot of money, because you're not having to pay rent or whatever. Whereas if you're if you're presently working in a call center, then in this model of class, that means that you are lower middle class because you're doing clerical work, right? You are doing a white collar job. And this still gets used all of the time in like supposedly like sensible research. So I don't know, if we look at like class and voting in the UK, this is this going to have some sort of chart? See, here we go. See, this suggests that it's going to tell us class differences and similarities among voters, and it tells us that 42% each working class and middle class voted Conservative, 33% working class voted Labour, 28%. But the problem is that it's still using those ABC1 or C2DE social grades that we see here, which means that it is counting pensioners who, you know, are doing quite well because of when they bought houses as working class, but it's counting people who are doing lowly paid office work or call centers or whatever as middle class. And, you know, so that system just doesn't work anymore. And it's one of the many ways in which we talk about class badly, but also in which these sort of bad models of class are used in clever ways to convince us that, for example, left-wing ideas are sort of the domain of the rich and the sort of middle-class kids that have no cares in the world, whereas, you know, working-class people are voting Tory. But actually, it's that the ways in which those divisions are made in the polling are, frankly, ridiculous. Watching the World saying that class to me is what amount of disposable income you have. A class to me, sorry, is what amount of disposable income you have and your net worth. Yeah, I think like rigid models. Oh, Wout van den Eed is saying hello. Hello, thank you for joining us. It is it's lovely to have everyone here, and thank you, Andy, for sparking me off on that latest tirade, as it were. Watching the World UK saying class to me is what amount of disposable income you have and your net worth. So yeah, like some people really, really rigidly want to stick to a sort of orthodox Marxist vision of class as being where you sit in regards to the mode of production, and that's always going to be like the most or like one of the at least most important things. I mean, so watching the World UK saying, to be fair, Tom, working class people are voting Tory these days, but it's not to do with class. And yeah, in some respects, but also the ways in which we collect that data are bad. Like we still do the thing where we assume that like manual labor means working class and like you know, like office jobs or like jobs that are brain work aren't, and like that's just not the case, like in quite the same way as maybe it once was. Like a lot of people who are like tradespeople do really well, like, you know, plumbers get a decent amount of money, right? It's actually quite well paid. Electricians, like these are like manual jobs, like they're skilled jobs. Like I would not want to rewire anything that was connected to the mains, like, because it is super skilled. Like I've got friends that do like theatre lighting, and like they will talk about like plug stuff and like power and the sort of some of the stuff that you sort of learn about in school about like ohms and stuff and resistance, where I'm just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they'll be like, yeah, no, it'll blow your hand off if you do it wrong. So they're like skilled jobs, but they are like manual jobs, which in this kind of classification system would be classed as working class jobs. And I think culturally we think of as working class jobs, but they're actually often much better paid than other jobs which we might think of as sort of middle class jobs, if that makes sense. Quantum Fire is saying that, Tom, I have to say I thought tonight would just be you ranting about Dominic Cummings. There's not like a huge amount to say, I don't feel, about Dominic Cummings. Like, we all knew this stuff already. Yeah, so I've not watched the Dominic Cummings testimony in great detail, partly for some of the reasons I might mention in a minute. But for those of you that are elsewhere in the world and maybe don't know, Dominic Cummings is a chap that used to work for Boris Johnson, the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. and was working for him during the early stages of the pandemic. And earlier on today, he gave testimony to a parliamentary committee, which I think they have these in other parts of the world, which are like sort of where certain members of parliament have like a little club where they get together and chat about particular areas. So they've got a committee that's been talking about some coronavirus stuff, and they got in Dominic Cummings, who had worked for Boris Johnson and then quit earlier in the year, relatively dramatically, because he, for various reasons which aren't super important. But some of the revelations that he came out with in this testimony today, and I think some of it yesterday, were that early in the pandemic, the Boris Johnson and his colleagues wanted to pursue a herd immunity thing, so that they didn't want anyone to try and stop the COVID coming through the country. They just wanted everyone to get it so that we develop an immunity and get over it. But all of this stuff was quite obvious at the time of COVID, like earlier last year. Like they were saying this stuff relatively openly, and now we have this weird thing where a lot of the media are pretending that this is new information that they weren't aware of, when they absolutely totally were. In fact, it's going to be difficult to find it now because it's going to be so flooded out, I think, of the news by more recent reports. But yeah, early on in the COVID pandemic, that's definitely what they wanted to do, and they were saying it relatively publicly. But the way the media works is that they didn't really latch onto that quite so much. In fact, they sort of went along with maybe it's a good idea until now, when they're actually 17th of March 2020. So yeah, here is a article. I mean, I don't know, this website doesn't look, I don't know, it might be great, I'm not sure, courthousenews.com, but from March 2020, where he's like talking about that. In fact, like there was some fascinating commentary on like Twitter and stuff, where let's find where a lot of people, definitely people on the Labour left at least, and definitely like a lot of people who are usually sort of referred to as shit posters on Twitter, were saying that, maybe this is going to be a big deal, this COVID thing, and we should lock down. And there was a fantastic moment where so here we have Labour are calling on the government to publish their scientific advice so that public can have confidence in the UK's approach, as Britain increasingly becomes an outlier in terms of not cancelling events, etc. Because people were other countries were closing down for in various ways, and the UK just totally wasn't. And then Jen Williams, who's a journalist for the Manchester Evening News, sort of saying sort of wryly going, presumably, so more people with humanities degrees can form expert opinions on epidemiology, more expert than, say, a group of senior professors of epidemiology. And then Ayesha Hazarika, who is a advisor, or has previously been an advisor for members of the sort of leadership of the right wing of the Labour Party, sort of sarcastically saying, yeah, I really need some hipster analysis to reassure me, right? And this is all directly in response. This is that people on Twitter are going, look, we need to sort of start closing things down because, as we've seen here, Boris Johnson and that are going like, actually, we can just get herd immunity and it's fine. But now, a year and a bit later, they're all pretending to act surprised that this stuff was being said, because now we know that we should have been closing down stuff earlier. And it's just ridiculous the way in which the media are pretending this is all a surprise, and like none of this is revelations. It is just frustrating to watch. Let's get back to the chat. I think it's partly the Ketra Kralek saying that is partly the drama of it all they're entranced by, as he's quite the personality, one might say. sort of interesting because he seems like quite the personality, the way people talk about him. But then when you actually see him talk, I don't know. He's just he's a bit odd, which is sort of interesting. Do you think Sienna's saying? Do you think the media are doing this? They put all its validity all on Cummings. I wonder whether, and saying that we already knew that they wanted herd immunity. Yeah, it's been sort of frustrating. Oh, Just a Snack saying I'd have to leave. It was a very pleasant stream. Have a good night, all. Thank you for I'm sure. I imagine you've probably gone now. I was in the middle of just ranting, I'm afraid. But thank you for joining us. So and to Quantum Fire, I hope you're glad that I did get in a rant about Dominic Cummings. So in future, what I'll try and do is make the chat that comes up on the actual YouTube page a little bit bigger because it's very small writing, isn't it? Oh, someone's saying Uruj Aklak is saying, hey Tom, thanks for recommending those Oxford introduction books. I'm glad you found them interesting. They're interesting in that they can be really useful or they can be a bit frustrating. In that all of them tends to be, they sort of serve as both introductions. So I think the way in which they're sold are as introductions to, for example, I thought I had one. Do I have one that I can pick out and show you somewhere? Oh, there's one up there. Postmodernism, is that? Okay, so I've got the nationalism one here, and they're quite interesting in that, like, for example, this one is sold as an introduction to nationalism, right? That you could pick up and, you know, get the skinny on what nationalism is. But I think the way in which they try and encourage academics to want to write them is by going, actually, you can also make a new argument in there. So, for example, this one gives you some introduction to sort of key concepts in nationalism, but at the same time is also making its own very specific argument about nationalism. So they're sort of odd. And I wonder whether that's different in, like, I remember reading, I think one, like, maybe it was like the history of, like, Chairman Mao or something. Just sort of out of interest, really. A little while ago, like many years ago now, actually. And because that was sort of more of a history, sort of biography one, it was more just sort of telling the story. So I wonder whether it's the humanities ones in particular that are having an agenda. Makes it sound sort of devious in some ways. That's not what I mean, but like, they are trying to make a specific argument because that's sort of how it works. Maybe, I'm not sure, but so yeah, they vary, and I also think someone posted a bunch of sort of shot like photos. I don't know why I can think of that word then. Photos of we are still live. Sorry, everything blinked for a moment there, and I was like, oh, maybe we are still going, I think. I'm not sure. Oh no, it seems to have the internet. Maybe reassure me in a moment if anyone's able. What was I saying? I think the politics one. Someone was posting some photos of and being like, well, actually, this is, some of it is questionable. There is a particular agenda that is being pushed, but there's an argument that's being made where we might, they're the kind of book that you pick up assuming that it's a sort of neutral intro to a sort of topic area. Watching the world, saying you can hear me. Yeah, okay, good. Sorry, everything blinked on my computer, and I know that occasionally when I've done streams, for almost no reason that I can, any discernible reason, it's sort of cut out at some point, and then I've had to reconnect. But it does still seem to be going. So yeah, they're sort of working. Well, the main Ketcher saying the main thing I got from the Cummings interview was that he loves the word crackers. I don't know if I say crackers very often. Was it? cracking. I say cracking a lot. If like, I don't know, I'm somewhere and I order food and the food comes, I'm like, oh, cracking. Oh, this one's died. But yeah, that's all the thoughts I have on Dominic Cummings, because it's sort of it was interesting, but also very much wasn't. My opinion on Chomsky's books is that I've read on anarchism, or well, I listened to the audiobook and I enjoyed it, and I've read with my eyes the Occupy book, but that was a little bit longer ago, so I can't remember it. And obviously I've read Manufacturing Consent, which I liked. I was so this weekend I went to visit my brother who lives slightly further down southwest here in the UK, and which was nice. Yeah, as I said, it's not been allowed to go and visit people for some time. And whilst we were down there, they had like a cool little independent bookshop. We don't have independent bookshops near where I live. And I like Waterstones, but it's always kind of cool to go somewhere that's like not laid out exactly like a Waterstones is going to be. So I went to a bookshop and they had a copy of Chomsky's book about Palestine, and I was like, oh, actually, that would be really interesting to read right now. And actually, they had another one. They had a verso book that was like a collection of people from Palestine writing on Palestine. And actually, that was the one I was like, actually, I might get that. But then I was like, sometimes buying a book about a thing that is so topical at any time, you're like, oh no, they're gonna think I'm just trying to be cool because that's currently a thing that is like a topical thing to buy a book about. So then I sort of double guessed myself and didn't. Something I really want to read and seems to have been really popular, and I can't, like, really difficult to find a copy of in the UK actually, is a book called Paint Your Town Red, which is about sort of what's called the Preston model of sort of local governance, which is sort of this idea about community wealth building. And so there's a town, I'm pretty sure it's a town rather than a city, officially at least, called Preston in the north of England, which, but yeah, you can't buy it, which is annoying. And they do this sort of community wealth building stuff where they've really been focusing on, how with the spending that a city does, or a relatively, not massive town in this case, how can you make sure that that is being spent locally in ways that are supporting, not only supporting the local economy, but supporting like local sort of cooperatives and businesses that are, keeping that wealth locally, but also collectively in some ways. And I've just heard nothing but glowing things about this book, and Repeater, who publish it, keep tweeting about it, and I'm like, I want to read it, but I can't buy a copy. So yeah, the judgmental librarian. I mean, we all live in fear of the judgmental librarian, right? Branson's got me on his hit list for wanting his money. That's where my internet goes, probably. His suborbital tourism project. What's a suborbital tourism? Oh, below the orbit? What? Oh, right. So that's when you're not so far. I was thinking like I'm suborbital. I suppose we're all currently suborbital, but I guess it's far out, but not in. Oh, yeah. So books can be good for like old books that are out of print, but this is like a one that has just been published, and so it's not out of print so much as it's just sold out everywhere. If there is a PDF, I'm sure I'll be able to find it. I'm quite. Oh, in fact, I know. Yeah, I know how to find one. I like a book though. Actually, one of the things I sort of allowed myself to do once my Patreon got to a point where I was like, okay, this is. I can spend some of this money on making videos. Was that I'm now like I buy books now. Like I don't because you like most stuff you can, most stuff you can get a sort of copy of off the internet somehow, or you can, or often like it's cheaper to get like the digital version or whatever. But I find I spend so much of my time like sat in front of computers, whether it's writing, whether it's video editing, whether it's just doing emails and stuff, that actually being able to spend a considerable amount of time away from computers is quite nice. And so, yeah, one of the sort of, it's not 100% a treat because I wouldn't be I'd probably read a lot of the books that I read if it wasn't for work, for making videos. But yeah, the treat that I allow myself is to do it. Oh, so they do have a copy on Books. To be fair, I'd only looked on Waterstones and then on Amazon. Rich enough to not have to acquire. Oh, I would. I'm sure I'll be able to. Thank you though. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I think I've got an A Books account. Something I started using recently is there's a website called Hive, I think it's called, where this is going to be not useful at all for anyone that's not in the UK, but I will talk about it in like 2 seconds, I promise, and then we'll move on to something else. It's called Hive, and it's like online book selling, and I think it started during COVID, and you sort of buy books, and then they like support a local bookshop, independent bookshop. I don't have a local bookshop, but I supported one that's like vaguely near that I will never go to when I last bought some books. Okay, so suborbital flight lets you fly from London to Sydney in an hour. So I guess it sort of arcs round, does it? Virgin Galactic spaceplane goes to just over 80 kilometers, so considered space by US rules, but not international. But it doesn't go into orbit, just up and down. Fascinating. I've never thought about doing a Richard Branson video. I have thought a lot about doing a Bill Gates video. I already was quite keen to, partly just because of the pure amount of effort he'd put into coming across as really popular on YouTube, like a couple of months back, but also just due to but then yeah, just his complete breakdown all of a sudden. Like he suddenly, just a number of things collided to the point where he's no longer the cool, lovable nerd, and is now, people sort of recognize that maybe he's not such a cool guy. Yeah, Sci-Hub and that are good. Sci-Hub can be tricky to get onto, I find sometimes. You have to find a good proxy or whatever. But LibGen generally I find quite reliable and easy to get to. Just because, I don't know. I don't know what it is about the different websites, but that one always seems slightly more reliable. Might cut this bit out of the one that goes one that goes up for other people to watch at other times. So any journey between 2.5 could be as short as 45 minutes. I mean, that sounds, it's probably quite so that was what I wanted to do, was sort of deconstruct the idea of the benevolent billionaire. I think I wanted to sort of look at his book and go like, which I've not read, and sort of ask like, okay, why might he support some of these ideas? Are there ways in which, why might he not be advocating for other ideas? Because like his company, so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invests money in companies. Like it has for-profit and there's also ways in which one of the things about the patent, one reason he's against patents being open is partly because he can broker deals like directly, but also it's the broader thing that a lot of his money comes from patents, right? Windows is or from what's it called? Just like intellectual property more generally, sorry. And I've just completely lost my train of thought. So one of the reasons that he doesn't want vaccines to be available for everyone is simply because it sort of sets a precedent, I think, with intellectual property more broadly. And obviously, a lot of his money comes from there. So it's interesting the ways in which, I'm sure some of it comes from a good place, right? I'm sure it's not all naked self-interest, but am I back? It seems to be suggesting that I should be back. I don't know what it is that it might be that Call the Midwife is being watched downstairs, and that has possibly put a spanner in the works. Quantum Fire saying very few people seem to be able to have a middle view on Musk. People either love him unconditionally or hate him completely. Yeah, to an extent. I mean, when I made my video about and you can see me, thank you, I'm glad. Did it cut out? I don't know if it did cut out, but it looked like it might have. One of the things I set out to do when I made my video about Elon Musk was to, I don't know, sort of understand and recognize the reasons that people do feel some sort of connection to him. Thank you, Sienna, as well. Thank you for why is it that people sort of get behind him? Because I don't think it's not completely ridiculous. I think the things that he offers people and suggests he's going to do are really, you can see why they're exciting, right? It's like a little blip. Yeah, I think I think it went away and came back quite swiftly. Which, if it's going to do that, it's nice that it pops back. So one thing I wanted to do was sort of understand why is it that, from a genuine place of curiosity, why is it that people do get so devoted to him and his works? Because people do, like the flamethrower thing, right? When he sold a flamethrower, and some of those smaller projects where was also, I wonder how much was that about building a sort of fan base, because it's useful to have such a fan base. People do seem to get all in on him, I think. And I think the fact that people go all in on him means that sort of skeptics often will go all out. Brian saying that his Gates answer about that being a possible issue with trust in vaccines in general seemed reasonable. I mean, I think what he's... So it is, I've seen one of the interviews at least where he sort of suggested that actually it's because, we need to make sure that vaccines are created in the correct way. But regulation of how vaccines are made is a separate issue from intellectual property. Those are sort of two different things. I'm trying to think of something that there's loads of things that cars as a basic idea are not subject to intellectual property. There's sort of bits of cars might be, but anyone can make something that has four wheels and an internal combustion engine and goes. But you can't just sell them because there is, certain standards that they have to meet. And those two things are actually separate, if that makes sense. One of the really big things is that at the time he said that, the reason that people, one of the really urgent reasons that people were maybe we can open these up was that India was having a massive crisis, and numbers were going up rapidly there, and in fact that's where a lot of the vaccines are made anyway. Like, so they can make more vaccines there. It's just that the problem is that only one company can. So I think it's sort of two separate things, which he's sort of cleverly in some ways tried to conflate. And actually maybe they're not the same thing, is what I would say to that. And so I think there's two things. One is that, you know, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was really key in encouraging, for example, the people at Oxford University who initially said they were going to offer it for free to the world, to make it with AstraZeneca instead. So I wonder whether, like, partly there's a pride thing there. I don't know whether there's any, you know, money changing hands with the foundation or whatever there. And also Andy's saying in the chat that he has a history of fighting against open source software back in the day at Microsoft, since, yeah, it's a huge risk for their business, right? In fact, I think what's it called? The Movie Motion Picture Association or something in the US also came out against vaccines being waived. Oh, what have I done? I typed something weird. Movie Picture Association of America vaccines. Hollywood lobbyists intervene against proposal to share vaccine technology because, yeah, they were worried about their own copyright stuff, and they worried that, you know, if it sets a precedent about intellectual property, what happens if that's something else? And these very much are not experts in vaccines. I think I might have to wrap up soon because my voice is absolutely dying, I'm afraid. But it has been an absolute joy, as it was last week and the week before. I feel like I've ran away very quickly, suddenly being like I might go actually. But my voice is dying a little bit. But yeah, it's been a pleasure as ever. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back again next week at the same time, sort of 7 p.m. UK time, whatever time that is for you. Sienna saying, great stream. Thank you for being here again. It's so nice to see some familiar faces. These are always so much fun. But yeah, in between times, I'm going to try and get finishing the script for my next video because it's taken a little bit longer this time, but it's just been a big topic to try and both read a lot about and then synthesize all that stuff. But hopefully it's not too far around the corner finishing it off now. But yeah, pleasure as ever, everyone. And yeah, I will look forward to seeing you next time round. Here endeth. Dominic saying we'll try and get here early next week. Yeah. Come. I mean, you know, whenever. I usually try and do like 2.5 hours, maybe. Sorry to cut it slightly short this week. I just was like, actually, my voice is gonna die. But yeah, I will get on working on my next video even more. And Donella as well. Thank you so much. See you all next week. You can now enjoy this horrific photograph of me. Just before the stream actually turns off. Bye-bye.